David, could you move more in the center? It's a little difficult to hear here in the back of the room, I think.
The Huntley genealogy has been traced back to the mid-1600s. There are two books, black books, that you see there. Books 1 and 2 deal with John's sons, Moses and Aaron. Book number 1 has all of the Aaron ancestors, and number 2 is Moses. And you can see that somebody has done a lot of writing and a lot of research. I'm indebted to a friend and distant relative, Virgil Huntley, for all the information and help he has given me over the years. Virgil lives in Mystic, Connecticut. He is a bachelor and left his position with the U.S. Postal Service to devote his full time to Huntley research and the Huntley National Association. This association is an excuse for the members to get together once a year to talk about genealogy. It's a thrilling subject. Joyce and I have been fairly regular attenders at the HNA convention for the last couple of years. The Huntley farm, and Huntley's farmed and prospered for 150 years in New England, and particularly the areas around Lyme, Connecticut, Marlow, New Hampshire, and Leicester, Vermont. The Huntleys had been 5 generations in New England when Bethune heard the call to sell his holdings in Vermont and carry on westward and northward under the direction of Timothy Rogers. Bethune appears to have been the leader of the Huntleys in Vermont and had 2 grown sons, Zenos and Austin. We know from Timothy Rogers' writings that Timothy's mother Mary, or Mercy, was a Huntley, and we know that she had a hard life as a child. Timothy Rogers had scouted the Yonge Street corridor and recorded this in his journal. I traveled between 400 and 500 miles to a place called Yonge Street, about 30 miles from York in Upper Canada. After viewing this part of the country alone, I contracted with the government for 40 farms of 200 acres each. Each lot cost $30. Farm tracking today. The following 2 other quotes from Timothy's journal are these. I then returned to Vermont. After about 3 months, and on the 15th day of the 2nd month, 1801, I started 1 slave. And on the 17th, I started 7 slaves, and all my effects, and a large number of others with me, and had a tedious voyage. My wife, Sarah, had a son just before we started, that I named after the Chief Justice, John Elmsley Rogers. We had a great move, meaning a long move, nearly 500 miles, many trials, but reached the ground in entire wilderness country about the last of the 5th month of 1801. And when he speaks about the wilderness, he's speaking about Newmarket, as it was then. The following lines sum up Timothy's life. I was born in 1756, married in 1776, and had 15 children by my first wife. In 1801, I removed to Yonge Street in Upper Canada. In 1809, I buried 7 children. In 1812, I buried my wife Sarah. In 1813, I I married my present wife, by whom I have 5 children. I have settled 8 new farms. Once when moving to a new farm, I lost all by fire. I settled 3 new countries, where meetings of the Society of the Friends have been established. Now we move on to Bethune Huntley, who was the leader of the segment from New England. Bethune was granted a lot on 98 on the west side of Yonge Street. This is the farm property called Boneshaw that most recently was owned by the Ballards and is the 3rd farm north of Upper Canada Mall. As you probably know, the property is now in the hands of developers and the house is unoccupied. Bethune and then his son Theodore occupied the farm for 37 years. And can you all picture that farm? You know most of us know where it is. When Bethune and his family were passing through York in the spring of 1802 on the way to Lot 98, Timothy Rogers made the following observation. Bethune Huntley, being disappointed by the poor sleighing last winter, has now got ready to go to work. He has 7 children and is worth $800 or $1,000. Some things don't change. For many years, we had assumed that all of the 40 families who came to Canada under the direction of Timothy Rogers were Quakers. Research in present years, however, has proven that some of the settlers were not Quakers. Bethune Huntley, his family, for instance, were Methodists. Bethune seems to have been an active person in the local Methodist church, where he was a trustee. That first Methodist at the corner of Prospect and Timothy Streets. Bethune was also a trustee of the Selby Burying Ground at Sharon. That's a tiny little cemetery just north of Sharon on the west side of the road. You can hardly see it from a car because of the cut through the path there. Bethune Huntley and his 3rd wife, Eunice Church, had a son named Theodore, born in Canada in 1908. In the Quaker...
18.
Okay. 1808. In the Quaker fraternity was the family of Jacob Wynne, and the Wynnes had a charming daughter, Huldah, to whom Theodore was attracted. But there was a problem. Theodore and Bethune Huntley were staunch Methodists. Theodore, however, decided to change to the Society of Friends, which Huldah was a member of. We read of Theodore becoming quite involved in the local Friends meeting, and it was noted that he was a frequent speaker there. But when he applied for membership in the Society of Friends in 1828, he was turned down. He applied again the next year, 1829, and this time he was admitted. Eventually, Theodore married Huldah Wynne, who was a lifelong friend of the Timothy Rogers family. In 1839, Theodore sold the Lot 98 farm to Jacob Irving for £1,512, Halifax currency, or in other words, $6,048. Theodore wasn't happy about accepting paper money, and at his insistence, the deal was closed at the Bank of Upper Canada with 6,048 silver dollars. Theodore's wife, Huldah, née Wynne, died in 1865. She is buried in the Friends Cemetery adjacent to the Quaker Meeting House on Yonge Street in Newmarket. However, we have been unable to locate where and when Theodore died or where he is buried. He had 7 children, and we've traced 3 of them into the next generation. But past this, we've drawn a blank. So if anybody knows anything about Theodore Huntley, I'd like to hear it. So that's a little overview of how the Huntleys were connected to Timothy Rogers, and their part in the establishment of the community here. Where's Ralph?
Right here.
Oh. That's all the material I prepared, Ralph. So.
Are there some questions? Elmer has a question.
You said they came from Vermont.
Yes.
Where had they come from before that?
Connecticut.
Well, I mean they weren't North American Indians. So where?
They came from England about 1650 or thereabouts.
That long.
And then they migrated
Yeah.
towards Vermont. Vermont was the last American place.
That one. That's what I want to know. Where in Europe they come from.
Yeah, everything.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a complete list somewhere of all the family names that Timothy Rogers brought up?
The answer is yes.
Where?
I have such a list. I did not bring it tonight, but there is such a list. And I don't have it with me, but if you contact me, I can provide you with that list.
Okay,
You
thanks.
just want a list of the families, or every
Well, I'm looking
person?
for my family, and so I'm trying all possible routes because my family also are on lot 98 and 97, first concession here.
97 was a win lot too. That was on the opposite side of the road to.
This is mine. Were on the east side.
Yeah, that's right. That would be 97.
He bought. He first of all bought my ancestor John Richards, and he first bought it from James Griffin, and then the other lot he bought from John Dawson.
The Dawsons were neighbors to the bond shop property.
Yeah, 97 on the map up there. I'm just looking at it. It's Nathaniel Gager in 1805. On that one is lot 97. Was the
Well,
original.
on lot 97, I've got my registration numbers, and in the 5th of June in 1815, James Griffin sold it to John Richard for £400, 142.5 acres, part of lot 97 and 98, concession 1.
Interesting.
Does the deed indicate where he was from?
Oh, I got him. I got my John Richards. As first I've been able to find him is in 1812 in Pickering. But somebody had told me that I should try finding out who all was in this lot with Timothy.
Well, as I say, the list that is up there that Dave asked me to bring is a list that I generated from the atlas here. It is not. There is no actual map. I made up the map, and then I put in all the original settlers that were listed in the York Gazette. York. What do they call that? Anyway, the book that's sitting on.
See, lot 96 North is in East Gloucester, and we don't have the records for East Gloucester. We only have them for Whitchurch. The memorial books.
They don't show in the books?
No, because that's East Gloucester. We only have it for Whitchurch. See, Whitchurch starts at lot 96. Excuse me, East Gloucester starts at
That's right.
lot 96.
No, but 97 is on the west side of the road, so that was West
No,
Squillenbury.
no.
Mine's-
It's
mine's
East
on the east
Gwillimbury,
side.
it's east side of Young Street and west side of Young Street.
Okay.
But mine's
The
on the
lots are
side.
identical.
And I've got a copy here, even describes the big poplar tree as one of the key points, you know, for pacing off so many rods and
So
whatever.
that's East Gwillimbury.
Get that from Rick, you on this?
Yeah. I just got a copy.
Well, then number 17 on there is Thomas Young is the original name that settled it. But he was not a Quaker, because I've listed all the ones that are Quakers on that.
No, I don't think mine was a Quaker.
No, because
The names of the, was it 40 families that came with Timothy Rogers were listed in Truella's?
In Truella's book. That's where I got the list from, and I can provide you with that list if you'd like.
Or you can just see if there's a Richards there, that's all I'm after.
Okay?
Thanks.
Quick question. How did Thomas Young spell his surname?
Have to see
it's probably Y-O-U-N-G, because they got the Young for Young Street from somebody in Britain
Yeah.
who didn't
Well,
have
the Thomas Young that is on this one here is Y-O-U-N-G. That one.
Yeah,
Now, how did they make a decision to come to Canada? Did you find that out or not?
well, as it was then, it is now, best country in the world.
Right, or no strike?
The best answer in the world.
I think, you know, as you move westward, you could get free land or cheap land. And they seem to stay on one farm 20 years, or maybe it was 37 in Fitzgerald and Theodore's case. So it looks as if they would move on a farm, they clear it, they improve it, they sell it for some money, and then move on to the next one. Same thing as what's happening today in many cases. Yes, Jen?
A lot of them moved to Canada too because, I think that this is right, they were in America, like in Vermont and Connecticut, right? And the states were fighting Britain, or they didn't like the British, so they moved to Canada because Canada was sympathetic towards Britain. Right?
Yeah, that's the United Empire Loyalists.
Yeah, but I think a lot of other people did too.
I've got a question. You know, in the journal, he started his trek in February. And,
Oh, excuse me, you might be thinking, like, there's a difference in the calendar that took place about the 1750s, and you might be referring to like the second month.
He said he came by slave, and he started out in 1st of March, and that all makes sense. And arriving at the new location in May makes sense. You know, they can get a crop in and make things more livable until the bad weather comes. But how would they manage it in the spring? They'd have to change the sleighs to wagons. You know, they'd have to put.
They probably carried wheels with them.
That's all I can think of too. You know, they couldn't buy them along the way. Or maybe they could.
Make them all.
Well, you know, that's a little question that I have never seen explained. But all these treks that you read about start in February, and that makes sense because the snow is usually packed and hard in March, so that they would have good sleighing. But how they coped with the spring mud.
Maybe it was like they used to have carriages that had slave runners, and then they would change to wheels. They did put carriages like baby carriages.
children.
What date are we talking about?
Talking about,
The bearing of all these children.
oh,
What date are we talking about?
said it in here, 18, 13.
So are there present cemeteries that are available that they would have been buried in, or
Yeah,
buried
there's
on
a
the farm?
Selby burying ground, and some of them would be buried on the farm, no doubt.
What cemeteries are around here? If someone died here,
Well, there's
One of
Quaker.
The Quaker cemetery.
yeah, well, all right, if they weren't Quakers.
Hickside Cemetery,
The
the
Hickside.
Quaker Cemetery.
And the one on Eagle
One on
Street.
Eagle.
One where the Alexander Mirror School was.
In other words, I'm looking for my ancestor who died in 41.
Well, 1841. What was his religion?
I believe Methodist.
Well, there's a good bet that he might be in the Selby burying ground.
Selby?
Shelby, S-E-L-B-Y. But that's a fairly small cemetery. Really, it's two cemeteries. And if Isla Haynes were here tonight, she'd tell you that she's the boss of both those cemeteries. I asked her what she meant by boss, and she said, I do the hiring and the firing.
There also was a burying ground found on the Alexander Muir property when they put up the new building.
And that was Methodist, I
And
believe.
that was a Methodist church originally, property.
Well, are any of these cemeteries recorded? No, the Ontario Genealogical Society is recording
Yes, I think
cemeteries.
they are, and just recently done.
And we have quite a few of the records for this. George, just saying that George Lusby is probably the one that you want to talk to that knows most about where the cemetery records are in the archives that we have, and might be able to help you trace some of that. And after the meeting, maybe you want to talk to George, and we can.
Unfortunately, on that Methodist burying ground on Prospect Street, there are no records because it was quite a diligent search made for that. That's right. When that nursing home put up there.
When they took the nurse, that's right, they put the nursing home in, and that's when they discovered there was a cemetery there, so there was no records, were there? Hmm? They always knew there was something, okay?
Still there.
But they didn't know who was
Well,
in there.
there were two removals from there, wasn't there, George? Wasn't there an earlier one than just this last discovery when they were?
That kind of hush, you're right.
They reportedly moved some of the bodies to the Newmarket Cemetery, and there are a few of them up there, but very, very few. That was in 1879.
Or 69.
69.
There are two Huntleys here tonight, at least two that I recognize. And I'll introduce Ted Huntley and his daughter Brenda Lowe. You just stand up, so. Are there any others?
Where is it, around Newmarket? No. Not that I know of.
Yeah. Wayne Morgan is here. If his wife Karen were here, she is a Huntley.
Yeah, Wayne's prepared to talk a little bit about that if you would
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, and, and then Loxley Stuffles, member of this association, and he's,
I'd like to ask a question of the Historical Society.
Certainly.
There's a cemetery on Bayview South, just south of the police station. Does anybody know anything about that? It's about this size.
Not very good.
That was probably a Whitchurch. It's the Stevens, I believe. Stevens.
A Stevens. It's right on Bayview.
South of,
What, on the east side of Bayview, just,
Nobody seems to know what about it.
Yeah, Dave, I just wanted to ask, most of the Huntleys stayed in this area, and the other part of the question is, what types of livelihood have the Huntleys had over the years?
well, not too many stayed in this area. A lot seem to have or farther west. But like when I was a kid, I didn't think there were any more Huntleys. You know, there was a couple we knew, and I grew up in Keswick, not that big a place anyway, for them. But there were a couple around, and we didn't even know how we were related to them until we gradually got interested, dug more and more. It's an insidious thing, you know. You have a little bit of success, and then you want some more.
David?
Okay.
And he wants to know what the Huntleys did.
They were farmers, subsistence farmers, and they used to catch a few fish out of Lake Simcoe, and they were poor. You know, if you look at the district, the civils are joined right on to a Huntley section that Wayne will talk about. And a guy by the name of Bouchier owned most of Roach's Point. And so then the Huntleys were in between, Roach's Point on one side and civil country on the other. And the fishing really was a fact. There was no cash money in the wintertime except what they could get for selling fish. And I have my father's trout spear still, but they would catch whitefish and trout, lake trout. And I guess the ultimate was there was damn little cash. Yes.
The Huntley that you've been talking about that first came with Timothy Rogers.
Bethune.
Pardon?
Bethune.
Bethune. How many great-grandfathers?
I think you're the seventh generation.
Seventh generation?
Seventh. Before they left the States. There were 5 generations in the States. And then they
But
came.
this is from the time we came to, from
Yeah.
the man who came to Canada.
Okay.
Okay, Wayne, can we?
On behalf of my wife tonight, who is a Huntley and unfortunately can't be here. But when we moved to Newmarket, we didn't realize that we were distantly related to one of the pioneer settlers of Newmarket, so that this came as a bit of a surprise. Just to start back with Bethune, one additional piece of information that I think is quite interesting is that when he was in the United States, it says here that he served in the American Revolution in the 2nd Regiment of the New York Line paid by the Continental Congress. So he fought in the American War of Independence, which was a clear message he was not a Quaker. The other interesting thing is he came up here, he got land, and in order to get land you had to swear an oath of allegiance to the King of England. So they didn't hesitate to make that transition from fighting the British in the States to swearing an oath of allegiance. So that was Bethune, and he had one son that came with him. He was an adult son that came, and it was Zenos. And that name stuck in my mind because my mother-in-law could trace her side of the Huntleys back to Zenos, and it just sort of stopped. And she couldn't get any further back than that. And when I was rummaging around in the Historical Society archives, I found this book that David had donated to the archives. I looked in the back, and sure enough, there was a Zenos in there, just one. And it was the Zenos that my mother-in-law was related to. And sure enough, we could take it from Zenos, who died in 1842, take it back all the way to 1650 using this book. So it's really quite interesting. Now, Zenos was quite a character. Although he came to Newmarket, he moved on. And he eventually acquired land in North Gwillimbury, or what is now Georgina. And it's a lot right over here. It's a lakefront lot that has Thomas Huntley marked on that plot of land there. Now, the Huntleys still live on that farm on the Baseline Road. Jamie and Margaret Huntley. So we knew that it had gone back to Zenos then. And one day Jamie had us into his house, and we got talking family history, and he pulled out Zenos's will. And I think this is really quite interesting. Zenos had a number of children. His son Thomas, he left 100 acres. His son Bethuel, he left 100 acres. So, you know, names start to repeat themselves, so you got to figure out which Bethuel are you talking about, because he had a son Bethuel and his father was named Bethuel. He had a son Simeon. He left him 2 sheep. Now, I don't know what Simeon did, but Simeon went back to the States. I don't know whether it was because he got 2 sheep.
Were they black? What color were the sheep?
He had a daughter who, at the time of his death, was Mary McConnell, to whom he left 1 cow. He had another son, Rufus, whom he also left 2 sheep to. He had another son, Benjamin, to whom he left 2 sheep. He had a daughter, Elizabeth Gamble, to whom he left 2 sheep. And he had a daughter, Clarissa, to whom he left 2 cows, furniture, bedding. I don't know how Clarissa rated, but she appears to have been the baby of all the children. So his will is quite interesting, and they always wonder what did Simeon do that he only got 2 sheep. And I think it may have been because he was already well established as a farmer somewhere, whereas the other 2 may have been younger. In fact, they were younger sons, and the father was trying to help them set up. But when Zenos got his land, and
A little bit of thunder in the background, it's okay. Maybe that's Zenos walking around up there after you reading his will.
He had to, like all settlers, he had to petition for a crown grant. And it's interesting, that land he didn't buy from the crown, he bought from Calvin Eves, I think you said. Eves, yeah. But nevertheless, he did petition for land, and when you petitioned for land, you had to submit a number of certificates, and many of them remain in the archives. And one petition dated February 15th, 1825, was to Sir Peregrine Maitland, the Lieutenant Governor of the province of Upper Canada. And there again, in there he states quite clearly that he had taken an oath of allegiance to the king in 1807, that he did his duty during the late war, which would have been the War of 1812. So, I mean, these were Americans who fought in the War of Independence, who came up here and fought it. I think that's just mind-boggling. He also had a wife and seven children, 5 boys and 2 girls. And he was asking for a grant of 200 acres. There was a copy of his oath of allegiance. There was another one from the Surveyor General, Thomas Rideout, saying it does not appear that the petitioner has ever received any land. There was another one from Erod Smalley, saying that Zenos is an industrious farmer and behaved as a loyal subject during the late war. And then this one was interesting, from from W.B. Robinson in Newmarket, dated the 12th of February 1825. This is to certify that I have known the bearer of this Zenos Huntley for these 15 years past, and believe him to be an honest, industrious, and worthy inhabitant. Therefore, have great pleasure in recommending him as a proper person to receive a grant of land, being well assured he will improve it and make a good settler. Boy, we had a really great ancestor back then. So those are sort of interesting things that you come across. By the way, W.B. Robinson was a brother of John Beverly Robinson, and they all started out here in Newmarket, although John Beverly went on to become the Chief Justice of Upper Canada, part of the family compact. So we follow Zenos down. Zenos had a son, Thomas. He had another son, or his son had a son named Thomas, so the names really get confusing because they start repeating themselves. Thomas also had a son, Thomas, so we're into the third generations of Thomases. Although at that point, to distinguish them, they used a second name, and that was my wife's grandfather, and she called him Harland, but it's Thomas Harland Huntley. And he had a farm up there. Now, my mother-in-law used to speak of her grandfather, which would have been Thomas William, and he was a very staunch Methodist, so I can see how the Methodist stream came down here. We did not play cards, ever, and you did nothing on Sunday. You didn't even play music. Harlan had a daughter, Helen, which was my mother-in-law, and that's how my wife is related to the Huntleys. It's unfortunate, but we had some pictures of the farm up in North Willamberry, but Karen wasn't able to get down here to bring it tonight. But as I say, Jamie is still on that farm. So, anyhow, that's my little story about the Huntleys.
Thinking over the last several months, since there's been so much talk of people of 200 young, that my family has in some ways established the record. Maybe there's several others around as well, but we have actually lived on the first concession east of Yonge Street since 1803. Continuously.
Since when?
Since 1803, continuously.
On what farm, Sandra? What farm?
Well, we haven't lived always on the same plot of land, but we've lived within 5 miles about.
But are they listed?
I haven't looked at that.
They're not listed on that original list, so they may have bought it after one of these.
They came in 1803, and I brought the Bible, the family Bible, which they brought from Pennsylvania. They were Quakers who came from Pennsylvania. The Bible is actually in the early 1700s, but I've left it open at a page that's dated 1686. They were in Penn's colony, Pennsylvania, and probably there before.
Would you want to bring it over and hold it up so people can see? Or is it very delicate?
I will, but it's you can look at it afterwards. It's the way they've written. It's actually a good one. It's the woman who married Thomas James. Is the James family, and I first really became, well, because we were Quaker family on Yonge Street, and I've always lived in Newmarket. I've always associated with Quakers, and Mrs. Tuhela, who wrote the history, was our backyard neighbor, and so I grew up hearing all about it. after I got a little older, I got really curious about the James family, and I managed to track quite a few people who were on the same track as I was, wondering how we were related to Jesse James. And there is a Jesse James buried on Yonge Street in the Quaker yard beside the Yonge Street Meeting House, who is my great-grandmother's brother. And so it always intrigued me that there must be a Jesse James, so we've been tracking Jesse James for quite a few years, and I've met quite a few relatives and learned quite a lot. Now, I've got the Bible that came from Pennsylvania. They really settled around Philadelphia, and then they, after the Revolution, went to Catawissa. A lot of the Quakers came to Catawissa, and it was pretty poor quality land in Catawissa. It was coal region, and the Quakers really like fine farms and good horses, and I think they can find that along Yonge Street. Anyway, my ancestor Ezekiel James purchased just about where old Yonge Street is across from St. Andrew's College in 1803, and Ezekiel didn't survive the plague that happened in 1809, and his son John James stayed on Yonge Street, and then subsequently, I should interject there. When Wayne was talking about the Robinsons, John James married a lady called Phoebe Hilbert, and Peter Robinson married another Hilbert and had a number of children. And whenever you read about Peter Robinson, he's always called a bachelor. But they really were here, and he had quite a number of children. I think 5. Anyway, then they subsequently moved up around the time of their marriage, which was 1818. They moved up to Lot 90, which is Newlock, just south of Newlock Drive, which goes between Yonge and Bayview. So they lived there until the last bit of land that was severed there was about 1875, I think. I brought a pewter plate, which they apparently brought with them from Pennsylvania. And I also put out a few copies of things. One of the big scandals in the Quaker settlement was the murder of Isaac James, which happened in 1828. Ezekiel Jr. had gone over to Uxbridge, and Ezekiel's family always had fine horses, and he had sent Ezekiel, his son, or Isaac, his son, over to the Lundys. I think the Blue Farm. I kind of think that's where he was headed. At any rate, the person he was with murdered him, and so there was a big manhunt, and the man's name was Christie, and he was found in the States and brought back, and he was hanged in York about a month later. It was swift justice, and then after that, if you read Mary James married Joseph Gould, who was a member of Parliament in Uxbridge, and Joseph Gould was involved with the rebellion, and apparently when he was in Christopher Widmer's surgery in Toronto, he saw this skeleton, and it was Christie. Anyway, I was sort of reared on those stories. The other brother went to Ohio. His name was Isaac also, And because we've been involved with the Hicksite burying ground in Newmarket, Isaac went to Ohio and was instrumental in bringing about the Hicksite separation in 1828, also the same year. And he was brought to trial in Ohio, and it was quite an amazing trial there. And I don't know why we have a picture of Abraham Lincoln in our old boot box, and they said that there were several fairly prominent people involved. I've often wondered if it was him, but anyway. The other thing, there's a letter, a photocopy of a letter from Isaac written in 1833 to his brother John on Yonge Street, explaining his reasons for the Hicksite separation. So that's sort of interesting also. And then Josiah James started a planing mill and woodenware factory just on Ulock. And there's a print from the Newmarket era about his washing machine, and most of you ladies will be thankful you never had one. But anyway, he had a business there, and also with the Dennises, who had made pumps, wooden pumps, and the Dennises still live in Newmarket also. And then he subsequently went to Collingwood, and about 10 years ago, when I was doing my James research, I went up to Collingwood and met Jesse James. There's still a Jesse James living near Collingwood, actually. And I guess that's about, and the house that my great-grandmother, Rachel James, lived in is there. There's a picture of it as it was. They moved there in 1875, and it apparently is from Yonge Street. It's apparently a log house underneath, and it was moved in from Hermitage in 1875 and brick-clad. It's now Armstrong's property on North Yonge Street. That's about all. I just thought I'd like to draw it to your attention because it's sort of interesting stuff. I also have a rebellion box, but I didn't. Anyway, you're
Good.
welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Some questions. There was a question here, and then Paul.
Well, I've got a record here, just to interject, but John James bought the property on Lot 90 from Joseph Sutherland. And Joseph Sutherland had traded it. That property was originally owned by Ebenezer Doane, who built the Sharon Temple, or was the architect or the contractor or something like that. And Doane at that time, when he was on Yonge Street, had been a Quaker and had been a builder. So there must have been quite an active, almost industrial area along that part of Yonge Street. And I've often wondered.
Well, I think the second generation didn't stay in farming. I think they moved on into being builders or wheelwrights or carpenters or.
Well, the Doanes must have been builders, even when, I think, from what I read, from what I understand, they were builders in the States before they came
yes,
up
the
here.
Doanes were well known as builders.
And anyway, I thought it was sort of interesting that the interaction there, that property was Doanes, and then it was Sutherland's, and then it was James. And how long was John James on that property?
He died in 1849, but segments of it were still owned by
the family afterwards?
Mm-hmm. And about 1875, and then they moved into Newmarket. I mean, they moved in, but they settled on Main Street. They moved that house in from Yonge Street on to Main Street North in 1875. I don't know which.
There was a question here, Mrs. Huntley?
Do you have still family living someplace on Yonge Street?
Well, yeah, I live in the first concession.
Oh, yes.
I live within walking distance of Yonge Street. Yeah.
Well, that's really remarkable.
This is Paul Millard, who is on the executive of the Historical Society and is a rabid genealogist.
Or something, yeah. Anyway, as I said, Joseph Sutherland was on Yonge Street for a while. I think eventually he went back to the States. But then Timothy Millard, of course, had acquired land which butted on Yonge Street, lots 94 and part of 95. In 1833, one of his sons, Mordecai, acquired lot 50-acre or part lot 103 on the east side of Yonge Street.
Is that where Aunt Sarah lived?
Yeah, that's it.
Because she died, what, during the war?
Yeah, I think 1941. So that property had been in the family from 1833 until about 1941.
Well, and the main part of that house that's there is the original house that was built in 1832 or something.
Yeah.
It's all covered over.
Yeah, they're clad it with what, aluminum or something now, but yeah, that was
the
Aunt
walls
Sarah's
there,
house.
it's a brick building underneath.
And I used to go up there as a kid, and that's the only place I ever had elderberry wine. I don't think my mother knew how strong it was.
Did you ever go down those stairs that came down from upstairs?
Yeah.
Down by the, came down beside the old fireplace?
Well, I don't.
You remember the fireplace?
Sort of.
There, yeah.
What lot are you talking about?
Lot 103. It was a 50-acre parcel of property on lot 103 on the east side of Yonge Street. The building.
Oh, that's above Green Lane then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's across from the Sunoco station.
Okay.
Just on
Yeah.
the ground.
No, I was trying to focus on the map there. I was going to just relate it.
And then John Millard, who was Timothy's eldest son, at one particular point in time acquired lot 103 on the west side of Yonge Street. But I haven't got that far in my investigations yet. And we don't have East Grovebury and the memorial books.
Around where the Lounts were in that?
Well, the Lounts were further north, I
They were
think.
on Landing Way.
Well, they're supposedly on the top of the hill where the Yonge Street Hill goes down.
Yeah, well,
Because somebody was telling me that they were looking in the field and they found some rocks they think were the house that Lount had on that old Yonge Street.
Yeah, that would have been on the west side of Yonge Street, and I think in that particular point in time it was considered to be part of West Grovebury before it became East Grovebury. I haven't got that far in my investigations yet. But there you have it.
About where it's to be moved, their intent on moving it. It's an awfully big brick house to move, but they're convinced they can move it. We just don't want to move it into the back of a loading bay of a Price Costco or another Canadian Tire or something like that. So we're trying to convince them that they should move it somewhere in the residential portion of the subdivision. But it's still up in the air as to where it will be and when it will be moved.
Well, is the Dawson house going to be saved or is it being torn down?
No, it's been saved. It's been put on a permanent foundation. Now, it may get moved again. Our other problem is it's not being used right now. It's just boarded up. And we have the problem of vandalism associated with it.
And where is it now?
You know where the new Canadian Tire is?
No, I don't know this end of the woods at all.
Okay, north of Upper Canada Mall, the new Canadian Tire has been built, and immediately north of the loading bays of the Canadian Tire store is Dawson Manor.
Yeah, if you give me a call, I can actually take you out and show you that whole area if that's all right. I have pictures of the move and everything else, and we've been following it very carefully, but we really don't have very much control over that, and as Wayne says, he's done a lot of work with LACAC in trying to establish some ground rules as far as using it, but as developers have said to me, if they're spending millions of dollars for property, you can't tell me what I'm going to do with my property, and they can only hold on so long before it becomes, a factor in here. Is there anyone else that, David?
What sort of artifacts is a society interested in getting? Like old Bibles or?
Yeah, documents, the Bibles, pictures.
How equipped are you?
Well, I guess that should, I suppose, let me
Yeah, let's get this.
disconnect here.